Welcome everybody. Good to see you doing a bit of networking. We do have some time allocated for that. Now, we have an online audience. I want to tell all the people in the room, and hopefully the online audience is hearing us. And we do have one presenter that's going to be presenting from online. So my name is Ken Beer. I think I know most of you, but good to see you all here. And I want to, first of all, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we're going to run this wrap-up session and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I really like this event. I mean, we did this last year or the year before at least, and it's a really nice way for us to debrief about the conference for those that attended. Those who didn't manage to attend, you can get some insights of people's key takeaways. And we're also going to use this as an opportunity, the college, the Victorian chapter, as an opportunity to find out what you want in terms of topics for seminars for 2023. So there's a couple of activities during the break and the networking after where you'll be able to put in ideas, topics that you have an interest in, that we can then organise forums, seminars, or other sessions. Right, I'm just going to check our slides are working. So a couple of things. The recording will be shared online. So just be aware of that as you're making your comments and questions. It may be, well, it will be shared. I'll also take some photos. If you don't want those shared, just let me know throughout the evening or the afternoon and evening. So the process is that we're going to have very short, concise presentations on different topics. And I'm going to stress that again to our presenters. Very short, concise presentation. And I'll be sitting there and try to wrap you up. I know everybody will be passionate about their topic. We've got then, so about a 5-minute recap from that person of that topic of what was presented at the conference, what their insights, their takeaways were. Then we will have time for a few questions, either from the online, and I encourage you, if you're online, to put that into the Q&A there. The chat is functioning, and I do encourage those online to talk to each other, give your insights and keep that conversation going. If you want me to relay a question to the presenter, try the Q&A, although I'll try and monitor the chat as well. So we'll have presenter, a little bit of Q&A, and then on to the next presenter. We've got 4 presenters, then we've got a break, and then we've got another 4 presenters, and then we've got lots of time for networking, and the food will be arriving, and we'll all have a good chat. Now, for our presenters, there is a microphone here if you want to use that. If you're not going to use it, I encourage you to stand in this general vicinity so our online audience can hear. I think that pretty much covers what I want to do, but an official welcome from the Victorian Chapter Chair, from Chris Harrison.
But I would just like to welcome everybody that's turned up here today, and all those online. It's really good to be able to have opportunities where we can network and bring back some of those valuable insights that we all took in to our time in New Zealand. And for me, you know, some of those key things that came up for me in changing today for tomorrow, as the theme of the conference was around that inclusivity, like in New Zealand, like it just got me right from the opening ceremony how inclusive they are as a nation. And I think, you know, being able to work together and to really look at the differences that we bring to the table, I think is a really important way of thinking outside the box in you know, the future tomorrow in road safety. So I'm looking forward to the feedback and the way people have perceived the information and the presentations that they attended through the conference, and seeing how we can relate to that and put it into some practice into our work together in road safety. So thanks, I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, so before we jump into our first presenter here, does anybody have any questions on how we're running things, logistical questions. Now, for those that are kind of facing the other way a bit, there are just going to be quite a series of presentations. So you might want to turn your chair around and get yourself comfortable. We're not going to be doing table related stuff for a good hour yet, as in the networking component. Okay, well, it looks like we can jump into it. And we do have Michael here in person, Michael Newesteg, and I'm sure many of you know Michael from Ostroads, and he's going to give us some big picture stuff. I'm excited. You know, to get this thing, and your slides should just roll on through.
Thanks, Ken. Hi, everyone, and hi those online. So, yeah, I was on the organising committee with the College of Road Safety, and I just want to try and give some context and some personal reflections as well. Now, where are you? Oh, at the back. If time permitting, I'm happy to go into a little bit of what I spoke about at the conference, being what Ostroads is up to. You want me to use the microphone? Right. No idea what I was talking about.
You can talk about Ostroads stuff if you get.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Well, you just give me an indication whether I should go on to that when you see the slide. So this was a record-setting conference for this particular conference. We had the biggest number of registrations ever. You can see there was 21 countries represented. There was about 500 people there in person. Can I just check, just from those of you here, who was there in person and online? And so some of you weren't there at all. That's good. Okay. And just to share the awards, we had the usual awards, and there was a new award. This was the first time the College of Road Safety has introduced a Women in Road Safety Award. And so there was a function held the day before the conference. So that was nice. And we had Liz de Rome taking out the first Women in Road Safety Award there in the middle, with the Minister from the Minister of Transport in New Zealand. On the left, you've got Jamie McKenzie, who won the Young Leader Oration Award, and Judy Fleiter won the fellowship. So they were very popular choices, and yeah, that was presented at the gala dinner. It was a really nice event. And the 3M APRS award went to a company called SafeTech, and they developed a device called the Tri-Sign Remote Access Multi-Message Sign. So it's something to help keep road workers safe. And there was also a highly commended couple of awards there, highly commended for ARB, who developed NetRisk 2, and Main Roads WA in partnership with GHC for a low-cost urban safety program. Kath mentioned the inclusion, and it was, for an Australia, it was really good to see how the New Zealanders do that, how they integrate the Maori language and culture into their work. And there was a number of seminars, sessions that focused on that. As it was just for an Australian to be immersed in that was really cool. A bit of a standout, I reckon, from the conference was the let's say the maturity of the discussion in New Zealand about their safety journey and where they're at. I think we're all pretty excited for what we saw and where we reckon they might be able to take things. So they've got the language kind of firmed up. I'd say they're pretty tightly messaged, and they've got a really good group of people. So with a minister like this, who was happy to stand there and speak off the cuff for a long period of time without any problems, like making any stuff ups, really on message and seemingly really committed. I think we can be really proud of what's going on over there. I think they also, the conference made a big effort to promote connection with the health and environment sectors particularly. So that's something that, right from the minister down, they really understood that road safety is not about one thing. It's an important outcome to society, and it needs to other outcomes. So there was, Christchurch was, it won me over. I'd never been there before, and it's a beautiful place. And I think as a venue for a conference, spot on. They had a really nice walkable spine in the city running along this little river, and there was, you can see here the people getting involved, people from the conference who got involved in walking tours and cycling and scooting tours and a bus tour as well. And being flattened by an earthquake some 10 years ago, see them. They've taken the opportunity to do some really good stuff. And as a pedestrian, one thing I really love, you get to it's in a 30k zone, so not a high risk environment to begin with. You get to a traffic light and there's no red man logo there. There's no green man, there's just nothing. You can push a button and it will then tell you to wait or go, but you're free to cross the road, even when you know that if you push the button, you come up with a red. And I think the message that they gave to the walker was, yeah, I love that. Look, this felt like a conference again. I tried to find a photo that didn't have Matt Allen in you know, but I couldn't find it. So we're going to go with this, but Matt, yeah, looks like he's drinking for Victoria there. It's a big effort, but no, it felt like a conference, and the vibe was really good. Just more on the conference, being there in person, I think it doesn't compare to a virtual presence. And I know we'll probably might have some more reflections on this, but people I've spoken to who tried to participate virtually found it much more hard going. And the people who were there had no incentive to go on with the virtual presentation or to engage with the virtual audience. So there was some bit of a fail. There were some virtual workshops that were established, and people went out of their way to go to them, but it just didn't really happen. So I think a bit of a learning. It's very hard to do a hybrid conference. This is the first time we've tried it, and we'll learn from it. But yeah, the reflection is being there is great. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of smiling faces. And I think a really strong appetite to continue in person. There's been a survey that's, I haven't seen the final results, but the indication if people want to be there in person. Just a slide from the presentation I gave. I had a reflection on the conference from my manager, who's not from road safety, but in public policy and so on for a long time. His reflection was, we've got a lot of thought leaders here. And I had this slide, because this is Ostro's with mantra now, action, helping to implement change. That's becoming our primary focus. But I think that's a bit of a challenge. I put that challenge to us as well, that the next conference, I really want to be presenting action, demonstrated change that we've made. Great to have thought leaders, but what's the point of thought leadership if it's not driving change? So yeah, I just wanted to leave you with that. How are we going for time, Ken?
A couple of minutes.
All right. I'll just show 2 slides. These are 2 pieces of work that we're doing at Ostro's that I know are very interesting to the road safety community. One is about that guide to road design that a lot of you love and a lot of you hate. So we're doing a review of that guide, not the guide content, that's come later, but a review of how we do guidance. How do you develop guidance? How do you keep it up to date? How do you make it accessible and relevant? And we know it's losing relevance in some areas. It's not relevant at all for some designers. So that picture of the snowball is inspired by Rod Troutbeck, who's the road design guru, who said to me when I asked him, when do we take stuff out of the guide? When do we retire stuff? Oh, we don't. It's like a snowball. We only ever add to it. So that, for me, is a bit of a provocative question there. I'd love to do something with that snowball other than just keep adding to it. And then the next project I just wanted to make you aware of, haven't seen, we're gaining some momentum on this project now. We're kicking off. We've got an expert advisory committee that we've established to provide some independent advice. We're kicking off a project control group next week. This is about turning those lofty ambitions into physical plans. We want to work with every jurisdiction to develop a plan that they can start putting into practice. And the image here of the backpack is really about us as Ostro collecting all the bits and pieces from around jurisdictions that make sense to be in the pack going forward, and then we plan our journey from there. But also that Ostros will play a role, we're coming on the journey with you, and you've got 8 jurisdictions, eight jurisdictions in Australia, you've got a Commonwealth, got 500 something local governments, and New Zealand has got its federal government and then its own local governments. but we have to, yeah, we've got to understand this track together. So I'll leave it there.
Good. Stay here. We do have time for any questions. I've put a call out online to see if anybody's got questions, but from the live audience, would anybody like to ask Michael a question? Great opportunity we've got him here. Wendy.
Yeah, he was there quite a bit. So he came for the dinner. I remember him staying for at least a few hours for dinner. I reckon he would have been there for a good half day on one day. I saw him again the next day he was there. And he was mingling as well. So yeah, I hadn't seen that before, and I think a few Australians were getting a little bit embarrassed. But also great credit to Colin Brodie in the past, Fabian Marsh now. They've obviously brought these guys along and been able to do a lot of education. So yeah, it's really impressive.
During the minister's presentation, and there was the online questions, and the one that was getting the most likes was, "Can you come over to Australia and talk to our ministers?" Yeah. Everybody was for that. For our presenters up here, can you just repeat the question from so our online audience gets that? Any other questions, Michael? I'll ask a quick one. So you've been at Austroads now, what, over a year, 2 years?
Yes.
20 months, okay. What are your biggest insights about Austroads as the entity that it is?
Yeah, change is hard. Austroads it's changing, the place is changing, and the reason is because you've got transport departments that are finding life very difficult. They've lost staff and they've lost funding, and more we need to huddle together and preserve what we've got. Austroads provides a format, a structure for bringing that together, and we're more and more being asked by our members, and members being the transport department primarily, being asked by them to help deliver. So our board do not want us to produce a report. They want us to produce a report that drives action, and they're asking us to walk along the path and help drive action. Hence why we're running a consultation regulation impact statement at the moment, something Austroads has never done before. We're setting up new systems. Like one of them is about temporary traffic management, devices that are using temporary traffic management to accredit them, provide training and accredit trainers, and trained people. So there's a lot of these things being set up. I'd say it's a pretty radical change. 9 years ago, I understand there was 5 people at Austroads, now about 70, and there's new people coming on board every week. So there's a lot of change, and that's really reflecting that we're starting to drive the car with you guys. So.
Round of applause, Margaret. Okay, so thank you, and encourage our online audience to pop their questions in as we go. So we're going to go straight into our next presenter, and we're moving things along, and we have Jeff Potter, and Jeff was certainly there in person, and Jeff's going to talk about the climate change aspects that were discussed in the conference, which was quite unique, wasn't it?
Thank you. Yes, it was indeed. It was one of the most striking things I think about the conference was the extent to which so many speakers and presentations were taking a holistic approach to changes in the road transport system, not solely focused on changing the safety outcomes, but all the other things to be changed at the same time or needed to be changed at the same time to improve quality of life more generally. Now, as I say, there was one specific plenary section that focused on this, and I'll talk about the things that covered in one of the major presentations in that. But as I say, across all streams, there were aspects of Maori cultural appreciation of community and place, environmental impacts, and overall improved well-being outcomes rather than just economic outcomes with changes that New Zealand make to its transport system. The particular paper by Professor Simon Kingham, do get online. Yeah, the whole slide set that he used, all 69 slides of it, is there to download it, and it's well worth a read through, even if you don't look at the video recording of this presentation, which I also highly recommend. He's the Chief Science Advisor to the Department of Transport or Ministry of Transport in New Zealand, as well as being a professor at the University of Canterbury, and was very clear that just because he said it doesn't mean it's government policy, and if that sounds like something the government would disagree with, it's probably just his idea. But they're all pretty good ones to my view. Very much focusing on an avoid, shift, improve model, knowing that there is an imperative in New Zealand, politically locked in, to move to a zero net carbon emission model. And because unlike Australia, so much of their electricity generation is already hydro and geothermal, that makes transport the largest sector for production of greenhouse gases in the New Zealand context. And very clear from his presentation and others was that's not a problem they can just electrify their way out of by replacing fuel tanks with batteries. It needs to be more than just that, in part because there are some circumstances where batteries won't work. You're going to be stuck with internal combustion for a long time yet. But areas like pollution, where in New Zealand about 3,300 deaths a year as a result of pollution, about 2/3 of which is related to transport emissions. Before you get into greenhouse gas abatement and the necessity to deal with that, to reduce global warming, problems with obesity and the reduction in lifespan, overall mortality and morbidity, and demand on the health system that comes from that. Those in the room will be pleased to know I've now got my e-bike and doing something about it. Mental health and well-being wasn't an aspect of transport I previously thought, but they did produce some very interesting research showing a difference in mental health outcomes, stress, depression, and overall well-being, radically better in people who cycled and walked for their major commute versus those who drove solo cars in congestion or travelled by public transport in crowded, congested circumstances. And this is quite good data around that, which is referenced in this paper. And the other aspect that is tied into how you design a road network was tied into the community and community interactions that you get around the road, particularly spotted this slide, a map of social interactions between people living on 3 different streets, the one in red with 16,000 vehicles a day travelling the street, the one in blue, 8,000, and in orange, 8,000, and the one in blue, 2,000 vehicles a day. And just the difference in the number and variety of interactions between residents of different households in that street is a reflection of the impact of traffic volume on community. And of course, safety, which is the main reason that we're here, why we're in Christchurch in the first place. One thing that he did spend some time on was that a sole safety focus can have unintended outcomes. And Michael did show you that beautiful photograph of cycleways around Christchurch, which was terrific. That is not to say that there was a contractor who was being overly officious about enforcing workplace health and safety. It just shows the difference between what is acceptable in terms of personal risk of injury in a workplace OH&S regulation context versus what we do every day and don't think anything about. They could eventually overturn that because the objective was to build a cycleway where it wasn't a high risk for people using it. Importance of time and speed. I know there's another presentation later on focusing on the speed, but a couple of points to make. One around travel time reductions tend to lead to increased travel. If it takes quicker to get there, you go there more often. If it takes quicker per kilometre to travel a journey, you can start the journey from further away. And congestion suppresses latent demand. The opposite also happens. The latent demand can be turned into disappearing demand. All right, that was the wrong direction. No, the rest of the slides are not there. So I won't show you the picture of the river that was built over in Taiwan from 1970, where there are 16 lanes of traffic, including 4 raised lanes above a riverbed, versus 2005, where the central road had been removed, the traffic had been, lanes had been reduced to just 3 lanes on each side of the road, beautiful parks, cycleways, walkways, water down the centre. And the question was, where did the traffic go? Did it cause chaos in the surrounding streets? No, it just disappeared. People weren't making the journeys that way because there wasn't the capacity to do it, or they chose to do it in different ways. Other key elements that came out of it around speed limit setting. Firstly, looking at what is the optimum speed of minimising greenhouse gas reductions in motor vehicles, which for a small passenger vehicle, minimum CO2 was about 28 kilometres per hour. Minimum nitrous oxides was about 20 kilometres per hour. For large SUVs, trucks, diesels, minimum value for both was around 20 kilometres per hour. Big push in New Zealand at the moment, but inner city streets with 20 kilometres per hour speed limit, which also removes the differential in travel speed and travel time between active transport on bicycles and transport by car. The incentive and decision to go by car rather than by bicycle becomes one about distance travelled and the mass or volume that has to be transported, rather than about the speed to cover the distance, because the speed's going to be about the same if we're looking at that 20 to 30 kilometre per hour speed limit, which coincides with the point at which the pedestrians are going to dive and run into whichever vehicle you're in. So that's also part of the considerations. So overall, I say go and have a look at the presentation, and the takeaway message from it was integration. You're not trying to solve a single problem with a single action. There are multiple problems out there. Any action you take will affect all of them, but it is possible to improve all of them rather than just optimise one. Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions for Jeff immediately? We did have a comment in the chat around the floods across Australia and their impact on the road network, and linking that with climate change. It was more of a comment. I thought that was an interesting one. I'll ask one while we think if others think of a question. So the college has high-level policy, strategic people, all the way down to sort of operational people who are doing road designs or making particular programs happen on the ground. So in terms of linking the climate change to all of this, how do you see that playing out at these different levels?
I think it's many doors going into one room. Whether you're coming to the problem of how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions, how do we improve the safety of the transport network, how do we make the cities and streets better places to live and to be in, they're all the same problem. So wherever you come from, there are also answers to other problems when you're solving the one that brought you there. I know, sitting in a government policy office and cost benefit calculations for can we justify doing this, and having worked on the 40 kilometre per hour school zones, I can only imagine what working on 20 kilometre per hour global speed limit would look like. I imagine also what it would look like. It's not just about the safety benefits that would be substantial and immediate. It's also about other benefits that would take longer to realise. So in the case of the floods, improvements we're making now are about floods we're going to get in 15 years' time, not being orders of magnitude worse than what we're getting now. So some of them take time to pay off, but and others are immediate, and we'll look at all the benefits to justify what change it is that you want to make.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions from the group? Well, I just sneak over here and check the chat. So there's a question around, have 20 km/h speed zones actually been implemented in cities in New Zealand? If so, where? So there are some shared zones in New Zealand, aren't there?
There were parts of Christchurch and parts of Auckland where they've been put in on a trial basis. There was a consideration, I think, a presentation from Auckland, from Christchurch City Council about, that was 30 km/h across city zones. But I don't know if they've been actually been implemented yet. We're still on design stage.
Well, we'll ask Ross that one when he comes on to talk about speed. Any other questions for Jeff? All right, round of applause for Jeff. Okay, we're ticking along nicely here, and you're getting a round of applause from the audience there as well online. Just going to jump between these. Okay, our next presenter is Chris Jurovich. And Chris, many of you know, and he's passionate about data and infrastructure and all sorts of good stuff. So he's the perfect man to sum all of that.
Thank you. Thank you. So, all right, great. Thank you. So I'll get straight into it. I went to the conference virtually. So my experience was flavored by that. The good side is that I was able to trial through lots and lots of abstracts and so on, and just form my views that way. So a little bit different to those who can show people in person. Now, Jeff actually really, explained some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, linking safe systems, sustainability, and community goals. This was a really strong flavor that I got. It sort of grows out of the whole transport integration talk that we've been talking for the last 10, 20 years. Basically, we need to move away from doing just road safety. It's really about getting the benefits right across mobility, environmental outcomes, decarbonisation, neighbourhoods, etc., and the community benefits. So tactical urbanism got mentioned a number of times, and that's really good. It's given a few years ago that was still a dirty word. Now it's being hailed as success. So there was definitely a lot more on speed management this time, and essentially speed limits reductions is just one way of going about it, but there were a lot of examples of traffic calming and different ways of managing speeds on different types of roads. Now, again, there's that link to active transport, as Jeff explained, the lowest speeds enable people to safely travel, and they do. This is actually the first time I've gone to work on a bicycle. So sort of proud of that moment. And it's again because the tremendous amount of work's been done in the city that a middle-aged guy like me can actually cycle and feel kind of safe. We're not there yet, but there's a lot more work to be done. Great examples from around the place of what we can do here. Roundabout revolution, like to play with words. Raised pedestrian crossings with roundabouts, cyclist bypasses, and raised roundabouts. There seems to be quite more activity and interest in roundabouts, and I know you're doing a lot of good work with that. I'll talk about maturing road safety programs from the perspective of infrastructure. So that's been, again, it's an ongoing journey, but you can sense maturity. So better governance. There's a lot of talk about how the New Zealanders have been approaching their programs and what problems that arose for them. There's been a lot better analysis that leads to developing business cases for these programs and even individual projects, benchmarking and various kind of star ratings and IRRs and all these other risk assessment technologies and methods that have been used, and also some really quite innovative ones. So the one in WA I thought was really smart, had a very non-engineering kind of geographic approach to that. They're all valid, they're all, you know, some are better than others, depends on the purpose. And at the end of it, you know, the evaluation, there's, again, I think we're doing more evaluation, and that drives accountability. So again, going back to linking safe system sustainability and community goals, evaluation needs to go more than safety. Don't just do safety. There are benefits that need to be reached. Okay, data. I've always been a bit of a data guy, so this comes naturally. Increasing objective measures of road safety. And again, that's, you know, we have strategic SPIs. Chris knows way too much about that. So others are doing that. It's been success that now can be seen through the conference. Creating road safety network plans, network-wide data assessments and things like that. There's a lot more interaction with movement and place as well. And then that's absolutely crucial, because that drives knowing what to do where. I'd say most evaluations that I've seen were hampered by lack of data, and that's you know, small data sets, quite a few projects were sponsored by clients that just had single site, or just didn't really have a lot of data to back up any meaningful outcomes from these evaluations. Data is expensive and limited by old technology. I'll talk about that in the next slide. Again, seeing the same thing through the conference, the limited road safety data. So speeds, speeding, all these things are not yet available to most people who are using it, who need to have that. Non-car mobility is, again, paper after paper measuring vehicles, but we're not really measuring other modes that well. Community sentiments, and various forms of consultation and engagement, that's really strong, that's really important. And questions still posed by most things that I've seen around how do we measure things like sustainability and community goals. We do have expertise in that, it's just not in road safety to bring them. So that's the takeaways from the work that I've seen. Finally, the technology. I didn't go to see all the stands because I wasn't there. So there was a lot of technology there. But again, going through the papers and abstracts, a lot of GIS visualization and interpretation of data, that's really becoming stronger. It's increasing and being applied in things like road safety analysis and speed limit reviews. New Zealanders have done a great job on that, and in network safety planning. Rise of the digital video, that's moving out of the academic kind of use, and is being applied more and more in small kind of context of evaluations and looking at surrogate safety measures, things like time to collision or heat. There's a few different ones. And finally, lingering 20th century technologies. They're still very early days in vehicle to infrastructure comms, communications. There's some very little shown on Internet of Things, on like in terms of infrastructure sensors. There was some, and very little use of data, like applied use of data from connected vehicles. So we don't have the data, we not really using the information that the system gives us, that limits how we can plan for the future. So this is somewhat sort of negative picture there, but there are some signs of improvement in the technologies. That's all for me.
Good. Okay, thank you, Chris. Insightful as always. I will ask for questions from either our online audience or in person, but while people have a think about their question, tell us about the experience as an online participant. What was your feeling of that for the conference?
Well, I'll go in person next time. That's my conclusion from that. I was jealous. You guys were having a good time, and I was stuck in my lunch room at 5:30 a.m. The time difference, I understand. You can't do anything about that. But I think, yeah, it's a different experience virtually. Maybe like a low price kind of keep tabs on things kind of experience, but it just wasn't the same. Really good to have access to all the materials though. That's enabled me to do this and learn new things.
Good.
Yeah.
Questions from the group?
I guess if money and logistics was no option, so once you're like bringing the, how would you go about bridging that gap with the lack of data? What would we get for data in this field if you had all money and extra logistics in the world?
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question here. Chris Jurovich just got a blank check and he's going to now tell us how to fix all data challenges.
I used to have one like quick answer to that, measure everything. I think that would be that. There's multitude of technology. I think the short term, the data from connected vehicles is most promising, and I'm doing some work in that at the moment. But there are internet like this IoT on infrastructure. There's one little paper where they put sensors on wire or barriers. We were playing with this. Various people have been playing with this for years. These guys pulled it off. It just measures tension. It's lax. You go and send someone to look at it, and then maybe fix little things like that. There's no one source. It's just engaging with it and letting, in a way, maybe letting others lead and being open to it. And then just going back to the 20th century, putting down tubes.
Yeah, that might be a good discussion when we have our break to dig into that a little bit more. Do you have time for one other? Yeah, Chris? So the question for the online audience is why so much change going on in the roundabout design and implementation space at the moment?
Yeah. You want a good answer or the honest answer?
Give us the honest answer.
The honest answer. I think that there are people, have been people for a few years in the system who are open to change, and the conditions that they were working with allow that. I hope that continues. And then the demand for it is different. So for pedestrians, it's definitely a different demand. For rural roundabouts, different. There's always willingness to do more and do things better and adapt things. It's just the conditions. And we had conditions for 5-6 years where there was enough money to and willingness to experiment and measure things and evaluate things and then put them to in charge. So I hope that continues. Yeah,
and I think that when roundabouts are costing 12, 13, 14 million dollars, it's time to start relooking at how you design them and then the urban challenges, as you mentioned, where we've got other priorities now.
And DOT in case you were fundamentally creating those conditions. Credit you.
All right, round of applause for Chris. Thank you. Okay, and we have one more presenter before we're going to have our break, and that's Abby Hansen from the TAC. And it's wonderful to see Abby there at the conference. First conference, was it for you? Fantastic. With that, slides forward.
Yeah, so it was my first conference attending in person. I was relatively new to the I was around last year, but it was definitely a different experience attending in person than online. So that's probably aware I should take up in local government, but in my role with TAP, I do work with local government through local government grant program and the community grant program. So let's see, I'm interested in attending some of those sessions as well as other sessions with my learning in various areas. So some of these observations may extend from the work that I do as well as what I've taken away from the conference. But so I guess the main one being that local governments have a really important role to play in helping us achieve the overarching road safety goals. They play a number of roles in that they are the local road authority, a planning authority, they're also an employer of doing fleet management and key in lobbying for funding from government agencies as well, and also with engaging the community. So I think through a few discussions I had with some people that I met from local governments within Christchurch and New Zealand as well, the issues experienced seem to be quite common or across the board, particularly in terms of the amount of funding that's allocated or funding that's available to apply for, and also issues with engagement communities. Some trends, probably one that I've more observed in the work that I've been doing, rather than what I've taken from the conference, but the knowledge of safe system varies considerably among local governments. And I think that could be to do with perhaps that one about resourcing as well, in terms of availability to undertake development in the work that they're doing. Again, resources seem to be quite inadequate, and that's both human resources, but also funding. I know a lot of people that I work with or I communicate with have play a number of roles, and is not always their main focus. So that was a big one that's come across. And also that road safety initiatives aren't always prioritised or supported within local government. So there could be a lot of work happening in the background, but it's not always doesn't always come to fruition. And I think in terms of what I left in the conference with, or in terms of what I have to incorporate into the work that I'm doing, is that we need to work with local government more to sort of help them achieve the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So working in more of a partnership approach. One thing that I really enjoyed listening to is there was or the New Zealand agency was looking at developing or has recently introduced a community of practice. So I think that's something that could be, particularly with our local government program. We do fund a lot of quite impressive projects, and there's a lot of knowledge that could be translated through that type of partnership. So that was something that we would consider exploring or would be worth exploring. And also assisting with that community engagement side of things, and providing some more, whether it be resources or actually getting out there and educating the community. So that there was an interesting point that Jeff raised about discussions around speed, and that was the first time I've heard the think that if you lower speed to actually come doing the same speed limit, whether you're traveling by bike or not in the CBDs, and having those type of discussions brings it into perspective for people and helps these type of conversations as well. So yeah, I think they were my key takeaways, and then it's very grounding things. But for someone who's quite new to road safety, yeah, it's quite inspiring to see all the work that's being done behind the scenes.
That was good. You keep that. Okay, questions for Abby? So the questions, were there any community style projects or programs that were very, that Abby found very inspiring?
I'm not sure if this was presented a local government, but there are some disparities of work with the community engagement. I think it was the transport agency that they're doing with like Maori groups, so sort of commencing discussions and really taking them on a journey rather than a project that is ready to go, and this is what we're going to deliver. So sort of addressing what they really need or how they can support, I guess, their cultural practices in those type of projects, and probably one of the differing ones to general kind of programs.
Any other questions from the group? I'll throw one in there while people wait. So I don't think in my career I've ever seen the TAC have so much interest in local government. Why is that?
Okay. I guess the big start is all the work that we're doing, and acknowledged a lot of it is being carried out by local governments as well. So we ourselves can't go out and change the road network, but a lot of folks do follow the local government's authorities, and so working together in partnership with people who enact that change as well is something that is coming up in a lot of discussions.
Good. Excellent. All right, well, join me in thanking Abby. Hey, wonderful. Okay, well, we've had four great speakers to start. They've given us their insights, and we're going to have a bit of a break now. And in that break, certainly for those that are online, will have the opportunity to pop in some ideas on things that you would like to see covered in the 2023 calendar year by the Victorian chapter of the College of Road Safety. I'll be putting a Menti up, and of course those in person can also log in on their phone or come over to the computer and I'll type it in if you would prefer that. So we're going to have a 10 or 12 minute break. I'll round you up at 10 minutes and it'll take a few minutes to do that. And then we have four more exciting speakers, but please enjoy a cup of coffee. And there's some biscuits at the back, and I think we've got dinner coming after the next session. Is that right? Yes, Wendy's giving me a nod there. So enjoy a break, and I'll round you up shortly. I'll just get this going. See if anybody Macca Hubs, child safety and children additional needs.
So I think
how about you come up and say, what is that? Take it easy. Okay, we've got that. We can hear you. We're just gonna hopefully get your screen shared, or
yeah, I'll just do that now. Okay, we're away.
Okay, give me a second. I'm just grabbing the last people here.
Yep.
Okay. Right.
Alrighty.
Okay, we're back now, and we have our online presenter, which is Ross Gregory from the Department of Transport, to talk about speed. So Ross got a few slides on it. I think there's a video in there at the end, maybe, if the technology plays very nice for us. So over to you, and hopefully we've got the volume right here, because you're competing with some some music at the back, and we might see if we can get that turned down a bit. But oh no, that's good. You're nice and loud.
That's good. All right, I'll just talk at a normal volume then and won't try to project. I'll put my theatre voice on. So first of all, just want to do a quick acknowledgement of country. And this is something actually a reflection out of the conference of how well Maori culture is recognised in New Zealand. So I'm making it a personal point to do it for every presentation I do. So I'm down south of Mordialloc Creek. So I'm actually on Boonwurrung land in as part of the Kulin Nation. Not Wurundjeri, but I understand that the rest of the group is in the Wurundjeri land there, just north of the CBD. So yeah, I will be presenting on speed management reflections. And there is a little bit of crossover, particularly with what Jeff covered earlier. I do have the graph he was hoping to share. So there's a little teaser for you. In fact, I think it's on the next page. So just let me, here we go. So yeah, the first reflection I did want to take was one about road safety and climate change. So we have, just to start with some headline figures, transport accounts for about 20% of greenhouse gas emissions. This was from New Zealand, but also the same for Victoria. So it's imperative really that we do something to reduce the number of greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from transport. So reducing speed from 100 kilometres an hour to 80 kilometres an hour reduces greenhouse gas emissions by about 20%. And it also reduces fatal and serious injury crashes by about 20%. So there's a very clear dual benefit there to speed limit reductions, particularly on those lower order roads where we're not going to be able to get to them with an infrastructure solution. I also wanted to touch on, whilst it may be a simplistic way to think about reducing those greenhouse gas emissions just through simply electrifying the vehicle fleet, the modelling, at least in a New Zealand context, was about 40% of that change actually needs to come from mode shift. And then the other 60% is through electrification or otherwise efficiency gains from the network. So another benefit, obviously, of lower speeds is that lower speeds encourage more active travel. So particularly in urban environments, 40 kilometre-hour speed limits or even 30 kilometre-hour speed limits greatly improve amenity for people who are walking or cycling or increasingly using e-scooters and other mobility devices within an urban area. So these are some areas that looking forward then to what we can kind of do about that. So for those who don't know, my role is within speed management within the Department of Transport. So I do have my hands on the policy levers in a very broad sense. So clearly there is layers that go to change in policy, but seeing these sorts of things coming out through the conference highlights that there's more benefits just simply lower crashes, and particularly fatal and serious injury crashes that come from lower speeds. It also has a climate change benefit as well as also an amenity improvement in benefit that will encourage more active travel. I wanted to touch on a symposium that Department of Transport ran at the conference. So this covered research from Victoria, some trials, particularly the Mornington Peninsula Shire 80 kilometre an hour trial, as well as Auckland's experience with changing speed limits. So Auckland has changed speed limits on about 1,600 of their roads over the past couple of years, including some pretty extensive 30 kilometre an hour speed limits. So both projects showed positive changes in travel speeds and reductions in crashes, and particularly, once again, those fatal and serious injury type crashes. It was also demonstrated that the community support increased for the changes to speed limits over time. So at a period post-implementation, the support or at least acceptance of those changes increased. So Auckland was saying that prior to the implementation, it was about 65% not in support and 35% that were in support of the speed changes. Post-implementation, that flipped to being 65% in favour and 35% still, still in that not supporting category. So that was the sort of evidence that was presented by the speakers. And then we moved it into an interactive session of basically how to convert the research from those trials into policy change and also into widespread deployment of speed changes. So some of the reflections that came out were things like an inconsistent approach is confusing. So area-wide deployments are beneficial. And that's particularly been Auckland's experience, and they've got a critical mass now where the neighbouring areas to where there has been speed change are now saying, look, if you started, let's just kind of keep going and get on with it. Being self-explaining is another really important element, particularly for lower speed roads. So those 40 and those 30 kilometre environments do need to be supported, perhaps through some low-cost treatments. And the final one is to just be mindful to think about all road users and not just drivers. So there is a temptation to think that, higher speeds are preferred by drivers, so let's just default to a higher speed option. But reflecting back to the last slide, there is walking, there is cycling, there's e-scooters, there's many other modes of travel that use particularly urban environments. So we need to think about speed setting in the context of all users and not just those drivers. The third reflection I wanted to have was on New Zealand's speed management approach. So earlier this year, New Zealand changed the way that they do speed limits. There's a requirement for all road authorities to have a 3-year speed management plan. So that would be Waikatahi itself, as well as all the local government areas and other places like, in forest and national park areas. They're taking a movement in place approach to speed limits and a whole of system approach as well. And what that means in practice is that it's not just based on crash history, it's also based on looking ahead of what's the inherent underlying risk of that road environment, and then putting safety at the center of speed management. So whilst there isn't many hard and fast rules, one is around 30 kilometers an hour at schools. So it's basically a requirement to have that in place by 2027. Or otherwise have good justification why that wouldn't be inappropriate. So perhaps in a rural environment where most children or where all children are being driven, it could be justified to have a slightly higher limit, but still no higher than 60 kilometers an hour. And also as a starting point, 80 k's an hour on rural roads without barrier protection being median and roadside barrier. And the way they wanted to do this is through a social license approach. So for those who don't perhaps know what that means, that is, social license is basically building acceptance within the community for a particular response. So basically where they're at now in speed is a similar position to Victoria. And some of you might be familiar with the TAC Road Safety Monitor, which is published every year. And that showed that basically people's position on speeding is sort of a 6 out of 10 issue. They sort of understand it's kind of important, but then when you compare it to things like drink driving or mobile phone use or even fatigue, that's up around that 9 out of 10 in terms of risk that people rate it. But then similar to drink driving and mobile phone use, they were down around 6 out of 10, before sustained community campaigns around building that social license and acceptance in the community to lower speeds. So they recognise that it's a 10-year program of work. They've mapped it and they've sort of mapped out a 10-year process. It's not just a single campaign. It's something that needs ongoing messaging and support. And the basis of it is that line I've highlighted there, a life is a life irrespective of where they live. So that's just, again, a bit of a nod towards those rural areas where, just like Victoria, there's very skewed to the levels of trauma in that area. So just to finish off, I will have a quick video here. This is the first example of a speed of us ad around speed, safer speeds for New Zealand.
Alright, what should we? Oi, Clipboard,
Hello?
what are you doing?
Reviewing the speed limit.
The what?
Speed limit.
Why?
It's just too fast for roads like this one. You know, stuff's changed. New schools, new builds, people moving in. Well, we're looking at the speed limits to make sure they're right for the roads, to keep us all safe.
Did you like it?
Hey!
Wait,
Ah!
so are you changing all the speed limits?
Yes. No, just the rubbish ones. Just the shit ones.
Alright, hurry up then.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.
What?
So yeah, that's just an example of using using humour as a way to get that message across in speed messaging, which I think is something that we can learn from in Victoria, where you know, there's just multiple. Well, where we can learn from, just there's multiple ways in which you can get the message across. You know, it doesn't sort of have to be the whole, you know, kind of. Yeah, there isn't just one way, and I know that traditionally we've had a lot of success with the you know, the sort of pretty high impact type messaging, and certainly there's a role for that, but you know, there's sort of many ways that we can approach changing community sentiment.
Great. Thank you, Ross. Round of applause. Now, there was one question that came in online from Emily McLean. And so what levers were needed for the speed management plan in New Zealand, and how do we pull those levers in Australia?
Yeah, good question, Emily. So there was actually a change to the legislation, and it doesn't directly translate to Victoria, but the way that the sort of legislation works in New Zealand is they've, in a sense, made it a requirement that each council area has a 3-year speed plan, and that plan is consulted on sort of upfront. So you go once every 3 years to the community, highlight a number of roads you want to change, do that consultation with the community, and then basically get your plan signed off by Waka Kotahi, which is the equivalent of DOT, as the you know, as the sort of approving authority for speed limits. So that part still works quite similar to Victoria. How can we translate this to Australia? Well, I think in a Victorian context, we do have capacity even currently to look at area-wide speed changes. And that Mornington Peninsula example is a good one, where they basically just every high-speed rural road within their municipality, they blanket change to 80 k's an hour. And we've also seen some other LGAs around inner Melbourne basically change their entire local road network from default 50 to 40 k's an hour. So things that are already supported. And I think it's a matter of getting that messaging out there to those councils that it is already an avenue that's open to you. And in a similar way to New Zealand, and we're finding this actually in Melbourne, where a whole LGA has done their speed change, and then the neighbouring municipality says, you know, we want to do that too. So City of Yarra has done it, you know, Maribyrnong thought that's a good idea, we'll go and do the same thing too. Port Phillip thought that's a good idea, we'll do the same thing too. City of Melbourne is sort of filling in the areas that haven't been done already around there. And again, some of those other councils are starting to pop up in those areas too.
Thanks, Ross. We're probably going to have to keep moving on unless there's a burning question from somebody.
Sorry.
Yeah, John?
Today. saying that lower speeds is code for poor road maintenance in rural area. Unfortunately, in rural areas that has been the case. I'm talking about the South Gippsland Highway, where the speed was lowered to 80 kilometres an hour, warning sign saying the road is in poor condition.
So I'm not sure.
Those sorts of things.
Did you get that, Ross? Did you hear that?
I got the gist of it, which is around the temporary lowering of speed limits due to road conditions. So that is it is a process that DOT has and has been in place for about 10 years or so now, where basically, yes, if the road surface is in poor condition, that there is provision to be able to lower that speed limit to 80 k's an hour, until such time as the road can be reconstructed, and then it would be put back to that 100 k's an hour again. So that's. Is there anything more you want to? I could expand on that, or
I'm not sure we quite have time to expand on it. It is certainly one I think a few of us will be talking about over dinner. So we
fair
might
enough.
Put that one into the networking component. But thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. And I think we have Game Man playing, so it's karaoke time with Marilyn.
All righty.
Oh yeah.
You want? I'm going to talk about posters. So it's a little bit of a different take on my experience of conference. And it's mainly because I was part of this collaboration, so I kind of am really excited about how it's going, so I'll tell you about that. Then also content this. So this came about because I don't know about you, but I got really tired of going to conferences and there being a few of those posters down there. And they were the tiny little packet. It seemed as though the audience had tried to put every single word on the poster with the excuse for people to just sort of stand there and read breaks because it. So I got a bit frustrated about that because I know that as an academic, I'm not a designer. And I was like, no, at a dinner after wine, and I was sitting next to a colleague of mine who's a designer, and we were venting our frustration to one another. I was a researcher who was a big pretend designer, and he had classrooms full of designers who were grabbing abstracts off the internet and being pretend researchers because they had a subject called science translation. So I just thought, how can this not be something that we just use and do and see how it can work for us? So this is the second year that we've done it. And obviously last year we did it all online, but this year it was the hybrid. This is kind of my take on this. So has skipped too far. This one.
This way then.
They're not hearing me. Is it better? Is it up?
Yeah.
Am I just talking into that?
Well, just
So I can't help myself. There you go. So this is a collaboration between the College of Road Safety and MARTA, which is Monash Art Design and Architecture. It's also led to a change in the format at the conference. So instead now they're just being a sort of a lunchtime tour. We have these 3-minute presentations where we have a rapid fire where all the poster authors get to stand up and give a 3-minute spiel. So in one session, you're seeing up to 15 authors. So they then go into the hall for the live Q&A. I was one of the poster authors, so I was put next to, and I attended virtually. So I was put next to my poster on an iPad, and I got to talk to the people who were at the conference about my poster. So they're the good things about the format. As a delegate who may not be interested in all the topics, you only need to wait 3 minutes and someone else is up there. So it's likely going to be interested in someone. But as a presenter, that's the ad for your project for the whole conference. So if you're in one of those concurrent streams and there's a split in your audience and you're never found because you're buried in the program, well, it's there in the hall the whole time. So they're the good things. But what we also found is that the authors don't really think about the translation of your work. So in doing this collaboration and working with the student designers, you really have to think about what your key messages were. And that's something that I think we as a whole road safety community need to spend a bit more time on, because we produce these beautiful big reports or these journal papers, and then we wonder why the community don't engage with us. So this is a really key step in translating the key things that we do. And so these are the 10 posters from this year. Those of you who are there in person probably saw them. And they're really the product of the student designers and their translation, working with the authors. So we have 2 creative studios where we're all coming into the room as designers, and the authors come in Zoom and we talk about the content of their posters. And you can see some of those there. The one in the middle at the top there, that road rage. So that project was about people who go from being quite calm on the road to escalating into road rage, and how that sort of rumination works for individuals. There's other ones in the second from the left on the bottom, which is about bike ed, which was a fabulous project by one of our speakers this afternoon. But the other thing that the students did this year was they created a suite for the project. So every author got the poster that they were, that was printed by the local conference organisers in the vehicle, so authors didn't carry them. They also received a PowerPoint slide and a small version of their icon that they could use for social media. And people have been using these images to link to their project. It's almost like a branding for the work that they've done to increase their recognition of their projects. And so that's what I'm going to say about it. I'm really happy to talk to everyone. The only thing that I would mention in closing is that getting this link between road safety and designers is still tricky. The pathways are not clear, but the students who have completed work this year at Monash have an exhibition on that starts in November, and it's free and it's open and it's at the Caulfield campus. So if you're interested in going, you can find out more about working with designers. Just Google MARTA Now 2022 and you'll see all the details. It's free. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Wait, we'll see if there's any questions. Any questions either online or from the live group? A few people taking photos of that. Wendy. Okay, the question was, were the posters available to the online virtual delegates?
Yes, but so last year in the virtual format, when we just had a virtual conference, they were in a carousel format on the very first page of the website or the app. This time they were sort of buried and connected into the abstracts, and I would say that really didn't work as well. So if we were to do this again next year, we'd come back up and have a little carousel where you'd see the exhibitors' information on the front page. I don't know. Yeah. They were tricky to prize.
Were there prizes?
Yes, there were prizes. There were 2 prizes. One was for the best poster design, and then one was for the student who had the best design of the collaboration.
Thank you. Awesome. Give me a second. Okay, so our next presenter is Helen Linley, and many of you know Helen as well. And what are you going to tell us about?
Okay, I'm going to have a focus on the small people. I'm going to be focusing in on the session that I was involved in, which was around child restraints and transport of children in cars predominantly. And I guess for me, one of the things that jumped out really strongly is a lot of the presentations were on the research around misuse, the ongoing challenges of misuse of child restraints in motor vehicles. But also there was some research looking at how far we've come since the introduction of legislation in Australia about national road rules in 2009, where we did implement quite prescriptive road rules to support the safe transport of children in road vehicles. So reflecting how far have we come since then, and the research was clearly showing that there are more children travelling in the right type of restraint, and certainly over half are still travelling in an incorrect way. And I think sometimes I go back to my first role in Vic Roads, which was in 2009. I always feel like an interview with black, having a child background. So I always came into Vic Roads with an inclusion lens on. And I remember in that first year implementing the child restraint road rules that there were some invisible people. That was the children with disability. And that was when I got really interested in this area, which is what I'm doing now. And I was really curious why they're invisible. I was more curious why no one else thought it was important to care. And I always question in road safety, how do we actually look outside of what we see in front of us? And if you think about vehicles, I went to it was in 2010, a celebration of 40 years of the seatbelt. You know, we implemented that legislation in 1970. I thought, wow, we take it to 2009 to do similar legislation for children, and then it gets children with disability. We really haven't done anything. So, you know, I guess reflecting on the themes coming out of whatever we create, we live with. We've been retrofitting children into motor vehicles for a long, long time. And continuing to retrofit is going to have ongoing issues. And of course, then we have the future. And the future is where there's change. And I think for me, the themes around the work that we're doing today, around establishing the evidence base for the transfer of children with disabilities, I'm always mindful of how quickly we take a step to do something. So I've got changing standards up there. We're currently drafting a new section in the Australian New Zealand standard for child restraints to include variations to those restraints for children with disabilities. But we haven't had the policy discussion. Sometimes when we do that, we think, oh, God, it's time now. We've solved something, but have we? Do we know enough about the problem? So even whilst I'm driving, is constantly questioning what we're doing. So I guess some of the things for me being at the conference is context. The day before the conference, we spent half a day with industry. Medifab are one of the biggest suppliers of child restraint products, not just for children, but for older occupants and a lot of disability products. What is their context, and understanding their context, what can we learn from that? Following the conference, we then met with the Ministry of Education, we met with Waka Katahi, we met with people who work in special schools, because understanding context is where you start to find where the opportunities might be. And I think coming away from the reflections in that session of the research that's happening now, I don't know how we're going to address these things. Retrofitting children into motor vehicles is really challenging. So I guess, I guess the themes around changing today for tomorrow, sometimes it's being careful what we're changing today for tomorrow, because there are often unintended consequences. Some of those consequences can be great, but who are they good for? Who's actually in the mix and who isn't in the mix is what we always need to question. So they're just a little bit of, I guess, my snippets of takeaways of having some time to reflect on what I'm doing, what I'm leading today, which is really born out of implementing the child restraint road rules in Victoria, and seeing where the invisible people are and what are we doing for the invisible people, and often fitting a square peg into a round hole isn't the answer. So, any questions?
Thank you, Helen. So questions from the audience here? I'll kick one off while people have a think. In some of the meetings you had after launch, what were some of your real insights in New Zealand and how far progressed they are in the kind of work that your organisation?
Yeah, good question. And I think the meetings are all parts of the puzzle, I suppose. So what that is, everyone knows it's a problem. So when something sits not just in that the railroad, like that one track, then maybe it's the transport sector. When it sits across education, disability, health, and transport, there's a lot of circle moving. So even in New Zealand, where they've had a very funding model for access to products, they've got a very different service model. The issues are all very similar. So the symptoms around where it's not working, why isn't it working? But how does one government agency compared to another government agency understand where their role and responsibility starts and stops? And I think that's where the complexity that activating the social model asks us to go and engage more broadly and to work with others to solve those complex problems. I think New Zealand is really looking at the work we're doing. What we're asking is how can they get a benefit early on from the work that we're doing? And so we've got ongoing meetings. We've had meetings since we've been there, but we're on a learning journey together. So we don't walk in thinking we may have an answer. We're like, okay, we know we're doing something and there could be a benefit here, but who and how do we do that in a way that the cost is obviously kept at a reasonable level, but that what we're doing in Australia.
Thanks, Helen. Round of applause. Okay, and now we have Juliet Phelps. Who's going to come up and talk about cycling and bike ed, and you got to go home to New Zealand.
I've taken a little bit of license in what I'm talking about. I did talk about cycling, so we'll talk about some stuff that's related to my work as well. But yes, I got the opportunity to go to the conference I got the opportunity to present both virtually and face to face. So it was kind of interesting to have that perspective. But my virtual presentation was a symposium, but it was live, but not in a room where the face-to-face people could come. So that was like an interesting process to be part of. There was less than 10 people that attended online, and like hearing what Michael said at the start and others said about attending virtually, like it was, why would you go to a virtual part if there's 500 people where you could see face to face? So it was kind of an interesting part to be a part of, whereas a lot of the other ones were live face to face, but also had a virtual component. But of the about 10 people that did come to the virtual symposium, we talked about the Bike Ed program that we've redeveloped in Victoria, and we did 3 different presentations. We had a lot of engagement from the small number of people, but it would be maybe a bit more being able to be a bit more interactive if we had an opportunity with some people in the same room. And then I also did a poster of which one of them, I was one of the lucky ones to have a MARTA student develop do the design for the poster, and that was really great. The poster presentations, as Marilyn has already said, everyone did a really awesome, succinct job of a 4-minute presentation talking about quite a lot of different subjects. It was a really great room to be in to hear about quite a lot of different subjects, whereas a lot of the other sessions were kind of themed by topic. It was a great way to see some different kind of aspects of what people were talking about. And some of the posters were really amazing as well. My kind of key insights from the conference, I was kind of wanted to talk about 2 different aspects of what I got out of it. One was really around that active transports and broader than just cycling and road safety education, and a little bit about what I got around from the Indigenous road safety kind of side as well. I'm from New Zealand and worked in New Zealand at the early parts of my career in transport. And going back there and being part of the conference in Christchurch was a really amazing experience, particularly seeing how far New Zealand has come with their cultural awareness. Like, I had nothing like that going to school in the South Island. I had nothing like that in my workplace. So it was really inspiring to see, and maybe hopefully gives Australia a bit more hope that they also started from nothing as well. So there is a lot more that Australia, Victoria, Melbourne could do to bring cultural awareness to the work that they do. But New Zealand didn't start from 50% males, it started from 0. So from the active transport side of things, some of the really interesting things that I got out of the conference were around programs that have been delivered. Most of this was really from New Zealand presentations and also from people that I got to meet just from going to the conference as well to hear about some of their projects, but kind of similar projects to the Bike Ed program that I've been redeveloping, but around promoting bikes in schools and training for kids in schools to do Bike Ed, but also a lot of really great kind of activation programs around supporting the streets people. So that real focus on taking the focus out of the streets for the cars, but really around getting more people using the streets on bikes, walking, and sort of a lot of really local projects. So what a lot of the work that they presented on was central government funding local government to go and do the work for them. So there's a lot of money sitting around there, but also they were really supporting a lot of really great local projects to go and do speed reductions, put in new bike lanes and so on like that. And then there was some interesting research around like micro-mobility and how that is having an impact on the way that our road rules are currently. And then from the Indigenous road safety side of things, it was really interesting hearing both presentations from the New Zealand counterparts, but also people working in Australia around the higher road trauma for Māori and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and that there's lots of barriers for Indigenous people to get their licenses. And in the work that I'm doing in Department of Transport, that's something that we need to start thinking about a lot more. And really that amazing focus on how they engage with their communities, listening to what the communities really need. So there's a lot of learnings that we could get from that. and establishing those relationships and helping them build the capacity within their own community to help improve road safety. So, thank you.
Thank you. And we do have time for questions.
Is focused metro versus regional? Is it all over? And
I think, the question was from a cycling point of view, if they're introducing more cycling and active transport, then is it a focus on metro versus rural? I think a lot of it's metro because it's easier for them, it's a place to start. It's probably the same as here as well. Think about some of the pop-up bike lanes and that happened since COVID. And there was a presentation from Sydney as well. Yeah. Because there's more interest in it, definitely, and the speeds are already at a loss. A lot of it are able to introduce that with transport again.
All right. Join me in thanking Juliet. Now, I'm going to take this opportunity. Michael, come up here, please. So Michael is doing his PhD at Monash. He'll tell you a little bit about what that is. And I think it's a good opportunity because Michael, I attended Michael's presentation and he had a nice sort of summary of what was going on. And I think we'll be able to link back to some of the things that were covered there. So I'll give you a couple of minutes now.
Thanks, Ken. My PhD, as Ken mentioned, is looking at safe system and trying to understand, particularly within the Victorian context, where we're at and what that actually means to us. And so my presentation in particular was focused on practitioners. The survey within Victoria, which I'm sure many of you in the room were a part of. But the principal aim of that survey was to try and understand what our practitioners are actually aware of safe systems, principally, and then how they rate their knowledge. And that was the presentation that I provided, or I gave at the conference. The real key takeaway, and I think for many of us in the room have been in and around road safety for a long time. We've had safe system now for about 20 years, give or take, in Victoria, depending on when you talk about uptake. 2003 was the kind of the official sort of in a strategy action plan thing. My research indicated that we have only 75% of practitioners aware of safe system, and deliberately chose a broad definition of practitioner because, and I guess this is the part that Ken's kind of highlighting, is to pull all this together. Safe system in itself doesn't really tell us what it's meant to be or how to use it or how to define it or what the system boundaries look like. So as a result, we have many of these questions that we kind of skip past. We're 20 years in, hey, we know what safe system is, we're implementing things, and like a lot of discussions we've had today, we're talking about implementation, but we've skipped past the what bit at the start. And so my takeaway from the conference was we kind of implicitly know what safe system is. We assume we know what safe system is. We assume everyone else knows what safe system is. And we also assume that their version of safe system is my version of safe system. And then we have, no wonder we have problems when we actually get to the kind of implementation phase, because everyone assumes everyone else knows what it all is about. So many ways of thinking about Abby's presentation before, you know, we saw exactly the same thing in local government. We see, in fact, when we look at survey results, it's all sectors. There's no single kind of one sector doesn't know about safe system versus another sector. It's everywhere. It's government, it's non-government. Even when I dug down into thinking, oh, well, government has e-learning suite, sure, there must be higher awareness in government. No, it's exactly the same everywhere. But the one big takeaway for me was that, and the real positive here is that where people have heard of safe system, they are generally very supportive of it. And they're very generally supporting concepts that underlie it. And additionally, they're more likely to implement it. they say they're likely to implement. Now, what that implementation looks like is the next part of my research. On that later, placeholder. But it's I think a good pat on the back to say we've got kind of a concept here that people accept, like we should be able to kind of think about what we can do with that. And so I think the one thing that I took away from all of the discussions at the conference was about the systems thinking, whether we call it, say, system or we call it something else. You know, for thinking about what Helen presented before, thinking about from a systems perspective, thinking about who can provide what and how we can leverage that, thinking about environmental, how are we pull these kind of environmental gains in. So I think there's a lot of kind of, we need to take a little bit of a step back in my mind and start to think about, well, what can we leverage? What are the benefits that we can leverage from others? And there are many. When we look at the policy domains where they have done great things, and we can sort of say, oh, well, let's pull a bit of that into road safety and get the benefits.
Good, thank you. Well, any questions from Michael while we have here? Opportunity? Good. How long until the PhD's finished?
Don't mention the war.
Seems to be a common answer. Good. All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Well, I can see that Wendy's finished cooking there, and the food has arrived. So I'm sure we're all quite excited to get into that. I want to thank our 8 speakers there. So Michael, Jeff, Chris, Abby, Ross, Marilyn, Juliet, and extra special at the end there, Michael. Thank you. I want to thank Elle for all the work organising today, and to Wendy as well for helping out. So round of applause for and I want to thank all of you for giving us an afternoon to come along and chat about road safety. I hope you're able to stay around and continue the conversation. And thank you to those online who have stuck it out. And the recording will be available. You'll get an email with a feedback survey and a link to a few photos as well. So thank you very much. Enjoy the food and hang around, and eventually Wendy will pick you up.